Welcome to today's deep dive. Um, if you've ever stepped onto a treadmill at like a commercial gym, you've probably seen it.
Oh, yeah, the sticker.
Right. Right there on the console, usually peeling off at the corners, is that little color-coded chart.
The one proudly pointing to a slow, steady jog.
Exactly. And it labels it the fat burning zone. It's a very comforting image, honestly.
It really is.
It tells you that if you just maintain a moderate pace for an hour, your body acts like a furnace, melting away fat right there on the belt.
But today, we are completely shattering that myth.
We are. We're using a precise, science-backed look at how different exercise intensities actually manipulate your body's fat-burning hormones.
And the source for this is fascinating.
Yeah, we are analyzing a 2024 paper. The title is quite long. It's called The Release of Lipolytic Hormones During Various High-Intensity Interval and Moderate-Intensity Continuous Training Regimens and Their Effects on Fat Loss.
Quite a mouthful, but incredibly important research.
Definitely. The authors are Xiangui, Jiao, Yu Liu, Hong Li, and Haifeng Zhang. And it was published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine.
A very rigorous journal.
Yeah. So our mission today is to give you, the listener, the actual tools to optimize your time and effort based on real endocrinology, not just, peeling gym stickers.
I love that, because the treadmill chart suggests a very simple linear transaction.
Right, like a deposit and withdrawal.
Exactly. You put in 60 minutes of mild discomfort and you immediately withdraw burned body fat. But biology rarely respects those kinds of oversimplifications.
No, it definitely doesn't.
What makes this particular research so powerful is that it strips away our assumptions about calories in versus calories out.
It forces us to look strictly at the chemical messages in the blood, right?
Yes. The specific hormones that actually instruct a fat cell to release its stored energy.
Okay, let's unpack this. We know the treadmill chart is flawed, but how did these researchers actually prove it?
Well, to really understand the findings, we first have to fundamentally reframe when the body actually burns fat.
When it happens, not just how, right?
Yeah.
So who did they look at to figure this out?
They focused specifically on the physiological responses in 39 young women.
Okay.
And all of them were categorized as obese, meaning they were carrying a body fat percentage of 30% or higher.
Got it.
The researchers divided them into different exercise groups for a 12-week intervention. But to give you a picture of what this looked like, we need to talk about VO2 max.
Right, VO2 max.
VO2 max is basically the absolute maximum amount of oxygen your body can possibly use during intense exercise. It is a measurement of your engine redlining.
So, for you listening, if you're on your commute right now, hitting your VO2 max is that point where you are completely gasping for air.
Oh, yeah. Pure exhaustion.
Your legs feel like they are filled with battery acid. It is maximum output.
Precisely that feeling.
Yeah.
And the researchers used that metric to define the groups. The first group was HIIT 120.
Which sounds intense just from the name.
It was. These women exercised at a brutal 120% of their VO2 max.
Wow.
A super maximal all-out effort. They did 1 minute on, followed by a minute and a half of rest.
Okay, so that's group one.
Then there was the HIIT 90 group. They did 90% of their VO2 max for 4 minutes on and then 3 minutes off.
Still really tough.
Definitely. And finally, the MICT group, moderate intensity continuous training.
That's the treadmill sticker group, right?
Exactly. They jogged along at a very comfortable 60% of their VO2 max for about an hour.
Okay, hold on. I need to challenge this. If we have one group doing 1 minute absolute sprints.
Yep.
Another doing 4-minute hard intervals, and a third just coasting for an hour.
Yeah.
The total energy they burn has to be completely different, right?
You'd think so, but that is the most brilliant variable the researchers controlled for.
Wait, really?
Yeah. They strictly matched the HIIT 120, the HIIT 90, and the continuous moderate group so that every single participant performed the exact same amount of total mechanical work. Yes. Specifically, they calibrated the cycle so each woman completed exactly 200 kilojoules of work per session.
Wow. So the physics equation is identical?
Identical. The total energy required to move the pedals was the same across the board. The only difference was the density and intensity of the effort.
But wait, if the work is exactly the same, 200 kilojoules, and I'm pushing at 120% of my max capacity, I'm burning pure carbohydrates, aren't I?
You are, absolutely.
Because fat oxidation is way too slow a process to fuel a sprint. My body needs instant access fuel.
Spot on.
So during the actual high-intensity workout, my fat utilization is practically zero. How does burning carbohydrates now magically equal burning fat later?
That's the key. The metabolic ledger doesn't close the second you step off the bike.
Okay.
When you cross about 70% of your maximum oxygen uptake, your body does switch almost entirely to carbohydrates.
Right.
But by redlining the engine, you accrue a massive physiological debt. The researchers focus heavily on a concept called EPC.
EPC, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption.
Exactly. After a severe interval workout, your body has to do a lot of housekeeping.
Like what?
It has to clear lactic acid, repair micro tears in muscle tissue, restore depleted glycogen in the liver.
And cool your core temperature down, I imagine.
Yes, all of that. And that biological repair process requires a massive amount of energy over the subsequent hours, and the primary fuel source for EPOC is fat.
Oh, I see. It's kind of like driving a car.
How so?
Well, moderate cardio is like coasting down the highway.
Mm,
The engine is running, you're burning gas, but it's not working that hard.
right.
When you pull into the driveway and turn it off, the engine cools down quickly. But high-intensity training is like taking that same car to a drag strip.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You're redlining the RPMs.
Mhm.
So when you finally park the car in the garage, you can literally feel the heat radiating off the hood for hours.
Yes.
The engine stays hot, and you're still burning through fuel long after the drive is over.
A perfect analogy. The mechanical work during the drive might be the same, but the aftermath is profoundly different.
But what specifically flips that post-workout switch? Like, if the heavy lifting of fat burning happens after the workout, how does the body actually know to keep the engine hot?
It needs a trigger.
Right, because the fat cells don't just magically open themselves up.
Exactly. They require a chemical key. The switches that activate and sustain that EPOC furnace are known as lipolytic hormones.
Lipolytic hormones.
Yes. Specifically, the researchers measured growth hormone, or GH, and epinephrine.
Which is adrenaline.
Right. These hormones bind to receptors on the fat cell. Without them circulating in the blood, it doesn't matter how much oxygen you're consuming post-workout.
The fat just stays locked away and stored.
Precisely. It stays locked.
So to understand how these hormones function, the researchers essentially became hormone hunters.
They really did.
They drew blood from these women to track these chemical keys. But they didn't just do it once.
No, they were very thorough.
They took blood before the exercise, immediately after, and 3 hours after.
And they did this across multiple sessions over the 12 weeks.
Right, to see the long-term effect.
Yeah.
They mapped this exact sequence at the very first session, then halfway through at the 20th session, and at the very end during the 44th session.
It's a massive amount of data.
It is. I imagine bombarding the listeners with all that data at once is overwhelming. So let's take it hormone by hormone. What happened with growth hormone?
Well, growth hormones spiked across the board.
For everyone.
For everyone. Every single group that exercised, from the intense interval groups right down to the moderate continuous group, saw a significant increase in growth hormone immediately post-exercise.
So the 60-minute comfortable jog did successfully trigger a GH release.
It did.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Epinephrine, or adrenaline, told a completely different story.
A radically different story.
The data just split wide open. Epinephrine only spiked significantly for the high-intensity groups, the ones doing the 120% and 90% intervals.
Right.
But for the moderate intensity continuous group, the women who spent a full hour grinding out that exact same 200 kilojoules of work,
Their adrenaline basically flatlined.
it didn't increase at all compared to their baseline resting state.
Not at all. Think about what is happening at the cellular level here.
Okay.
The adrenal medulla, that's the inner part of the adrenal gland that pumps out adrenaline, operates on a threshold of perceived threat.
It has to feel like an emergency.
Exactly. It does not care about your total caloric expenditure or your mechanical work over an hour. It cares about demand.
Huh.
Exercise acts as a trigger for the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response. Moderate exercise simply doesn't cross the physiological stress threshold required to trigger the adrenal medulla.
It's just too comfortable.
It is. But push to 90 or 120% of your max, and the body panics in the best way possible.
Just dumping epinephrine into the bloodstream.
Exactly.
And why is that specific epinephrine dump so critical for the fat cells?
Because epinephrine stimulates an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase, or HSL.
HSL, got it.
Think of body fat as triglycerides. They're like large, stubborn storage boxes of energy.
Okay, I'm picturing that.
HSL is the biological chisel that breaks apart those large storage boxes into smaller, usable fuel packets called free fatty acids.
Wow.
Without the epinephrine spike to activate that chisel, the breakdown of fat is severely blunted.
So the moderate group is putting in a full hour of physical work, but they aren't sending the necessary chemical text message to the fat cells to open the vault.
That's a great way to put it. The message never sends.
But let's dig into the why here. Is the moderate group failing to get an adrenaline spike simply because a slow jog is too easy? Or is there something else going on?
The paper actually reveals a deeper physiological barrier, and it's directly related to obesity.
How so?
Chronic excess adipose tissue doesn't just sit there inertly, it is metabolically active.
Meaning it's doing something.
Right. It secretes inflammatory cytokines that actively interfere with neurological signaling.
Oh, wow.
Obesity physically blunts sympathetic excitation during exercise. The baseline hormonal response is dampened.
So the neurological signal that tells the adrenal gland to release epinephrine is essentially muffled by the physiological state of obesity.
Muffled is the perfect word. A lean individual might get a small adrenaline bump from a moderate jog. But for an obese individual, the signal is too weak to break through the static.
So if moderate exercise is completely failing to send that chemical text message in obese individuals, what is the absolute minimum amount of intensity required to break through that barrier?
Well, the researchers wanted to know that too.
Did they test the extremes?
They did, by introducing a fourth group, the SIT group.
Sprint interval training.
Yes.
This protocol is mind-blowing. These women were put on a cycle ergometer, and they did 40 sets of all-out sprints.
Yep.
But each sprint was only 6 seconds long. 6 seconds of maximum effort, followed by 9 seconds of rest.
It's incredibly brief.
For you listening, 6 seconds is barely enough time to cross a street. If you add up the actual time they spent exercising, it totals a mere 4 minutes.
4 minutes of total exercise per session.
And the initial blood draws from this 4-minute group present a fascinating twist, don't they?
They do. Early in the study, during the first session and even the 20th session, this SIT group didn't show an epinephrine spike.
Really?
Yeah, their adrenaline looked just as flat as the moderate continuous group. The 4 minutes of sprinting was not enough to overcome the muffled signaling.
But then, fast forward to the 44th session.
At the very end of the 12 weeks,
Suddenly, out of nowhere, their epinephrine spiked massively post-workout.
it was a remarkable delayed response. You have a 4-minute workout that fails to trigger the hormonal cascade for weeks.
And then eventually it works.
Yes.
It's like a rusted lock on a door.
Okay, I like this.
Right. Moderate exercise, that 60-minute jog, it just jiggles the handle, the door stays shut.
Yeah.
High-intensity training, like the longer 1-minute or 4-minute intervals, forces the mechanism open immediately through sheer force.
Exactly.
But this sprint interval group, it's like they were applying a tiny drop of oil to that rusted lock every single day.
Oh, that's brilliant.
For weeks, the key wouldn't turn. But eventually, the rust gave way and the lock popped open. But why did the sprint group take a full 12 weeks to finally trigger that adrenaline response?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are observing a profound, long-term biological adaptation.
An adaptation.
The researchers hypothesized that those 12 weeks of training fundamentally altered the adipose tissue sensitivity.
Wow.
By consistently exposing the body to those short, violent bursts of effort, the protocol gradually reduced the inflammatory interference caused by obesity.
So they were essentially rewiring their endocrine response.
Yes. Over time, the body adapted to the stress, cleared the metabolic static, and restored the normal, healthy, sympathetic nervous system reaction to intense exercise.
The lock wasn't just opened. The internal mechanism was repaired.
Exactly.
We have this beautiful, complex internal chemistry happening here. A delayed hormonal awakening in the sprint group.
Right.
A robust EPSC response keeping the furnace hot in the high-intensity groups.
Yeah.
And epinephrine text messages finally getting delivered to the fat cells. But how does all of this microscopic cellular activity translate to the external physical results for the listener?
$1 million question.
At the end of the day, people want to know what actually happens when they step on the scale after 12 weeks.
Well, the physical results validate the endocrinology perfectly.
Okay, tell me.
All the groups lost some fat mass, Even the moderate group, with their flat epinephrine levels, saw a small reduction in body fat.
Probably due to the sheer volume of caloric expenditure over the 12 weeks, right?
Likely, yes. However, the HIIT and SIT groups achieved significantly greater reductions in whole body fat mass and body fat percentage compared to the moderate group.
Okay, taking that a step further, the data gets incredibly stark when you look beyond just fat composition and look at total scale weight and BMI.
It really does.
Only the HIIT groups and the sprint interval group saw a significant reduction in their total body weight and BMI.
Yes.
The group that spent 60 continuous minutes on the bike for every single session across 12 weeks.
They saw zero change in their total body weight. None.
Keeping in mind that the two HIE groups and the moderate group did the exact same 200 kilojoules of mechanical work.
Which definitively proves that fat loss is not a simple math equation of calories burned during the workout.
Right.
It is a neuroendocrine event.
So what does this all mean?
Well,
You're telling the listener that 4 minutes of pure sprinting in the SIT group or 20 minutes of intervals in the HIE groups fundamentally beat an entire hour of continuous cardio for weight loss,
I am.
simply because they triggered this specific hormone cascade.
The data leaves no room for ambiguity. The moderate exercise failed to trigger epinephrine, it failed to maximize the post-exercise oxygen consumption, and ultimately failed to move the needle on total body weight.
Wow.
The intense intervals saved time and produced a biologically superior outcome. And honestly, this raises an important question about how exercise is broadly prescribed to the public.
Especially by major health organizations. If you go to a clinic today and ask for a weight loss protocol, the standard advice is almost universally based on duration, not intensity.
Absolutely. The American College of Sports Medicine, the ACSM, still grounds its primary guideline for the obese population in prolonged, moderate exercise.
What do they recommend?
They recommend 60 minutes a day, 5 days a week.
Jeez.
300 minutes a week of moderate effort.
Which is the exact protocol that flatlined on adrenaline and resulted in zero total weight loss in this study.
Exactly.
Not to mention the reality of human behavior. Telling someone who is already struggling with their health to find an hour a day, 5 days a week, to jog on a treadmill.
It's a recipe for terrible adherence.
Yeah, people have commutes, they have kids, they have demanding jobs. It's often incredibly impractical to live on a treadmill.
And what this deep dive eliminates is that high-intensity interval training is not just a hack for busy people.
Right, it's not just a shortcut.
No. By manipulating the intensity, you bypass the sheer volume of work required and go straight to the hormonal control center.
You stimulate the epinephrine.
You activate the hormone-sensitive lipase to break apart those triglycerides.
And you force the body to use fat to recover over the next several hours.
Exactly.
It completely flips the script on how we view exercise. You don't have to live in the gym.
You just have to be willing to be highly uncomfortable for a very short, very specific amount of time.
It's about chemical precision, not duration.
It also highlights the incredible resilience of the human body.
How do you mean?
Even in a state where the neurological signaling is muffled and compromised by obesity, the body can relearn how to respond.
Like the rusted lock.
Yes, it can adapt and restore its own hormonal sensitivity if given the right stimulus.
Which brings us to the end of our analysis for today. We've covered the core mechanisms, but if you want to dig into the exact blood draw methodology,
Or see the actual graphs of those hormone spikes.
yeah, I highly encourage you to read the full article in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine. It is a masterclass in controlled exercise physiology.
The matched mechanical work variable alone makes it a landmark piece of literature for anyone interested in metabolic health.
Definitely. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to follow the channel and turn on your notifications. We are constantly digging into the latest, most rigorous science to help you optimize your health, your time, and your knowledge.
They certainly are.
But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thread to mull over. We just saw how 12 weeks of high-intensity intervals could essentially repair a rusted lock.
Yeah.
It fundamentally restored the fat cell's biological sensitivity to the body's own hormones, reversing a blunted response that was previously thought to be a fixed consequence of obesity.
It's powerful stuff.
Think about your own body for a second. If a 4-minute sprint protocol can completely rewire an endocrine response in a matter of months...
What else could change?
Exactly. What other supposedly fixed physical traits, stubborn metabolisms, or nagging limitations in your body might just be waiting for the right intensity of stimulus to wake back up? Next time you look at that fat burning zone chart on the treadmill, remember, Comfort might keep the engine running, but it takes intensity to actually burn the fuel.